Hello, welcome back to the 100 Days of Manifestation series. Today, I want to talk to you about creating your manifestation anchor point. I've spoken about this technique before, woven into other topics, so you may be familiar with what I'm saying if you've been following along with these 100 Days of Manifestation. It's one of my favorite techniques, actually, and I find it to be super powerful. We're talking about creating an anchor point around the future that you want to manifest, and we're bringing that anchor point into the now. It's going to become something that you get to know really intimately and that you get really familiar with. And you can switch into this anchor point whenever you need to. When you're going from maybe a high vibrating place of emotion to a low vibrating place of emotion, you can always switch over into this anchor point that will allow you to start being future focused again. So, why would we use an anchor point? Why would we even need an anchor point? So, what tends to happen with our brains is that quite often we become past focused. Our brain is often really, really focused on probability rather than possibility. Okay, so when it comes to probability, our brain has become really good over time, of course, because it's helped us to survive, at calculating the odds and calculating what's possible and helping us to know what we need to be aware of in order to make sure that we survive, to make sure that we know what to be fearful of in order to survive. So when you've got a bunch of experience in your past, like maybe you've made a certain money decision that didn't work out so well, maybe you took out a loan or a credit card and actually it took you a long time to pay that off and you really regretted that. Maybe you also had a repeated pattern from childhood where you grew up in a low income home and things were just always a struggle. And it always just feels like, for people like me, for people like my family, it's always a struggle. It's always struggle bus when it comes to money. So if you've got this history going on and you've got that mental load going on, what your brain's going to do when you start wanting to look into the future and create something different, like maybe I want to have an extra 3K a month, maybe I want to have an extra 5K a month coming through my business, that would help me to feel really comfortable, that would alleviate any financial stress. What your brain is probably going to immediately do is start calculating, subconsciously, by the way, all the ways that it's not possible for you, because probability would predict from given your life experience that ain't going to happen, right? You've got possibly no experience of, in your background, creating this goal, because that's why it's a goal for you that you're striving for. You want to create a new thing in your life. You want to create a new transformation. It's a new chapter. So if you don't have a bunch of life experience that's propping you up and supporting you, saying, yeah, that's totally possible, of course it's going to happen. Like, we calculate based on everything that's happened before that, yeah, you're going to do that, right? If that is not happening in your brain, and let's face it, the vast majority of us in here are not doing that, you are basically slipping back into the human default, and it's normal. Nothing has gone wrong here. What we want to do, though, with manifestation is we want to stay future focused and present. We don't want to be slipping back into the past. And this is why anchor points can work so well, because when our brain starts that mind chatter up again, and it's the normal stories that might come up, like, well, it's not possible because this might happen. Remember this time when you took out that loan and then you did that thing and you got ripped off, so it's not safe to do that. Maybe you shouldn't do that. What's going to happen is you're going to start getting fearful versions of your future coming up. So even though you might be a little bit future focused when you think about your goals, especially if you've got vision boards up and maybe you're like me, you've got, your little post-it notes around that remind you of what it is that you're manifesting. What sometimes happens is that your brain is going to tell you, no, that's probably not going to happen because this outcome is more likely. And so it's coming from that probability calculation. Now, of course, yeah, that's totally possible, right? I mean, in all the worlds of possibility, yes, your worst fear is possible, but it is also possible that the best outcome can happen. And this is where we want to put an anchor, metaphysically speaking, if you like, on a mind-body level. We want that anchor point to be in your best possible future that you can dream of right now, given your limitations with any trauma that you've got and any experience that you've got and any limiting beliefs and perspectives that you've got right now. We want to put that anchor in the best possible scenario that you can imagine. So when it comes to this, and I've used this technique so many different times. I can give you 3 different examples. When I was building my kinesiology practice, I didn't see how I could get the money to have, my kinesiology certification. I mean, I figured it out, but I didn't know how that was possible. So I had this image on my vision board of me being a kinesiologist. And then I also had this image on my vision board of being fully booked as a kinesiologist as well. I didn't know how that could happen. And so my brain, because I hadn't really, had that experience before of having a business at that level, it would often divert back to, oh, you're going to have to stay and get a part-time job. And, it's probably always going to be a side hustle. And you've never done this. You don't have what it takes, to create that. And so when my brain would come up with that chatter, what I had in that scenario was me imagining what it was like to be practicing kinesiology, to be in the clinic, to be working with clients, to be seeing that diary fully booked, which was also a snapshot that I had on my vision board. And that was my anchor point. So every time my brain started up with that story of it's not possible, it probably won't happen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I went into, okay, yes, that's a possibility for sure, but this is also a possibility. It's 100% possible that I can make it happen. It's 100% possible that it could look like this. And when we do this with the anchor point, what I like to do is do a visualization with it and become really familiar with this visualization and allow it to evolve the more you use this anchor point. So, for example, when I was visualizing that, being in that clinic space, being with clients, seeing my schedule fully booked, all of that, I was imagining what I would be wearing, what kind of clothes in clinic would I be wearing? What was the office space like? How did it smell? What was the temperature like? I'm even remembering what the image is like in my mind because the clinic space that I wanted to practice in, I knew that quite well. So I was, imagining the white walls and the big window, and it was all very light and bright, and, the bed that was there and everything around me, and how I would feel in that moment as well. Going into that picture and being like, yeah, it's almost like a little mini movie. If I was watching a YouTube clip that just showed me working in this capacity, and how would I imagine that feels? And it would feel, really, really freeing, really like I'm making an impact, like I'm doing what I'm meant to do at this season of my life. And that really, really helped. It helped to the point where I figured out how to get the money together to complete my kinesiology up to the 3rd level. I figured out how to actually get into that clinic and start working from that clinic. And I figured out how to create a practice that was fully booked. Do you know what I didn't actually do? And now that I've actually come through that experience, what I didn't do, and I think I'd probably go back and do now, is I would also imagine and visualize the types of clients that I'm working with as well. Because I manifested some great people, but I also manifested some people that were a little bit difficult to work with and weren't my ideal clients. They didn't have the problem set that I really flourished working with. So I would probably also add in there the types of clients that I would work with, but it worked so well. And I've also used this when it came to delivering my daughter safely. So when I was in hospital with preeclampsia, and, for those of you that don't know the story, because I've spoken about it a little bit before, when I was pregnant a couple of years ago and they discovered high blood pressure and I got put in hospital, I was in a state of absolute panic, as you can imagine. And so when I got a handle on my emotions, and, it took some time, I reached out to friends and colleagues, and, I got some great help with hypnotherapy and tapping and Reiki and, all sorts, coaching. It was just fantastic. And as I built up, how I was going to manage this traumatic situation, what I started doing was having that anchor point. And I was visualizing myself in a hospital bed, holding her and the sense and the feeling that I got of having my baby daughter in my arms. And I was sitting in hospital for 5 weeks, reaching for this anchor point every time my blood pressure spiked, every time something scary happened in hospital, every time there was, someone in, the medical world who said something that freaked me out. I mean, most of them were fantastic, but the odd person just said something and I was like, what do you mean? What's going to happen? And it freaked me out. So that's when I'd reach for that anchor point and just go, right, I'm going to tap into that world where she is delivered and she is safe and we are both safe and we're having a wonderful experience bonding and connecting. Do you know what happened? She was delivered safely. It wasn't what I imagined because I didn't know anything at the time about having a premature baby. So it wasn't like that. It wasn't like I was sitting in bed in hospital and holding her and it was a beautiful scene. She actually had to go into NICU and she had to be cared for at that time as well. And she was doing great, but it was very different. It was me sitting next to her while she was in one of those NICU kind of boxes, and I was kind of holding her hand through the thing when I could. But that's what it was like. And you know what? It doesn't really matter if the idea that you have in your mind comes true in terms of the actual all the physical details or not. Actually, at the end of the day, what happened was my daughter was delivered safely. We were able to bond and connect, and it was just a very, very different environment to what I could have ever imagined. But you know what? The key details of that actually came true. Now, am I saying that that will work in all situations? No, not necessarily. It totally could have gone the other way. And I get that, so what I did what I could within my power to help my body stay calm and to help create the resources and the empowerment within myself so that I could manage that traumatic situation and so that I could keep showing up in the best way that I could in those moments, despite the fact that I was stuck in hospital and that I was having to take medication and sometimes scary stuff happened and doctors would say stuff that I didn't understand. Do you see what I mean? So I can't always guarantee for you that this anchor point will 100% turn out the way you want. But what I can guarantee is it's really going to help you to manage your mind along the way and help you to show up in the best possible way for you while you're going on your journey towards creating the reality that you want to see. So I've talked a lot about visualization here, and I know that some people get their knickers in a little bit of a twist around visualization because our brains all work very differently. So if you're more of a kinetic learner, for instance, where you like to feel things out, if you're more of an auditory learner, where you like to hear things, chances are when I say visualization, you may sense things in a very different way and it's no less powerful. So if you don't get the images in your mind, that's totally okay. I'm more of a kind of visual kinetic person. So when I go into my anchor points, I get a sense of a picture, and it's not necessarily like I'm looking at a photograph and it's got all the details and it's 3D and all that kind of stuff. I just get this sense of a picture with certain qualities around it. And I also get a sense of the feeling and the energy and the vibration. That is how I work. If you're auditory, if you have other qualities, you might literally only sense it, with your feelings. It might just be a feeling for you. It might literally be like you hear things, so that might be the way it works for you. You might actually see, words instead. It might come to you in phrases. That's totally okay. Whatever it is that allows you to get a sense of that future, that's the only important thing when it comes to an anchor point. It doesn't have to be an image. So when I say visualization, what I'm really alluding to there is tapping into the future and getting a sense of it in whatever way works for your brain. So this is what I wanted to share with you about anchor points, is reaching for that place all the time where you've either created the outcome that you're looking for. For example, it's the day where you've just realized that it's done and you've been successful and you're so happy. Or maybe it's a point a little bit after that where it's already happened. It's been integrated into your life. It's the new normal and you're just operating at that level now. What does that look like for you? Tap into that. Really, all of those feelings and emotions and sensations going. And that, my friends, is going to be super powerful for your manifestation practice. All right, I hope that's been helpful. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments. Let me know what you think of, using an anchor point. If you've ever used this technique before, I'd love to hear what you think about it. We also have something really exciting coming up next week. So I am going to be doing a masterclass in here. I'm going to be sharing all the details with you a little bit later this week. And it's basically going to be a session where we talk about your money date, which, for a lot of people, it can, when it comes to money tracking and getting a handle on your finances, it can be a little bit overwhelming. It can feel like, oh, that's a boring task. But what we really want to do with these money dates is cultivate a new relationship with money for you. When we have a very different relationship with money, when we have a loving relationship, a confident relationship, a relationship where we trust money, imagine what it would be like if you had a person in your life who you had full trust in, who fully supported you, who always has your back, who's always there for you and is there for you as much as you need and even more than you need. That you can always rely on this person. Imagine if you had those feelings around money. That's what we want to cultivate through having a regular money date. So I'm going to share it in this workshop with you all about money dates. What would you do on a money date? How you can structure it so that you can start to manage your mindset and develop a better relationship with your money, and also how you can get some awareness around what's coming in, what's going out. We're not going to be talking about dry and boring budgets. That is not my style. This is much more about creating a beautiful space, getting some nice things going in your environment, so it's a lovely space for you to be sitting with and having a connection with your money for this time. So if you want to join us next week, I'm really looking forward to sharing that. Keep an eye out in this group, and I will share all the details with what we're doing next week. All right. Have a lovely week. I look forward to hearing all about your anchor points in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are and what you're anchoring towards in the future. Bye for now.